Is the Proton Peacock actually a $280 paddle that plays differently than the rest of the foam crowd? When Proton sent these over, I expected another foam paddle that would slot right into the same bucket as everything else in that category. But after a whole bunch of time with the 15mm elongated and 13mm wide body versions, I found something a little more interesting than that. Full disclosure, Proton provided these paddles for me to play with, zero expectations attached. They retail for $280, which is definitely on the higher end, but you can grab them for less through the Pickleball Central link in the description or on my website, and using it helps support this channel. I do also have a code at Proton MPB. Everything you're about to hear are my genuine thoughts. Here's the central question. Does a $280 foam paddle that plays a bit more dense and controlled than the typical ultra muted, like every other foam paddle, justify its price when paddles like the Honolulu Pickleball NF, FC Plus, and upcoming CR Series, and Bread and Butter Loco sit around $180, not to mention the Rondas Quanta and Vatic Pro V-Soles at $100. Let's get into it. The Peacock is a dual certified foam paddle, USAP and UPAA, built around what Proton calls a proprietary high-density atomic foam core. Strip away the marketing language, and what you're getting is a full foam floating core design with an EVA ring around the central foam block, plus additional foam around the edges. I've yet to confirm the specific core material from Proton, but my sources say it's the ubiquitous EPP. It's available in elongated and wide body shapes in both 15 and 13mm versions. I do now have all shapes and sizes, but at the time of this recording, I have the most time on the two models we're going to talk about, the 15mm elongated and 13mm wide body. The core is where things get a little interesting. Proton cut their logo straight through the foam core. It's mostly a clever visual and shaves a little weight, maybe adds a touch of flex. More important is a patch in the center of the hitting zone that appears to be fiberglass, and I tried to confirm that, but either way, it doesn't cause the erratic jumps we've seen on the True Foam Genesis. The response here is far more consistent and predictable. The surface is described as roughness enhanced raw carbon fiber, more marketing speak. In practice, it's rougher than many surfaces, but not as gritty as the Loco, RPM Friction Pro, or even Proton's own Flamingo. The goal here seems clear. Proton wanted foam core durability, power and spin, but with a denser, more muted impact feel than the hollow thud you get from other foam paddles. The elongated version measures 16.25 inches long by 7.5 inches wide with a 5.25-inch handle. That's notably shorter than the increasingly common 5.5-inch handle on most elongated shapes. The shape also reminds me of Viola's Magnus. The wide-body version keeps that same short handle on paper, but mine measured closer to 5.5 inches, so your mileage may vary. Obviously, with this shape, the additional width adds more torsional stability. Let's start with the 15mm elongated. Static weight is 7.93 ounces on the lighter side. Swing weight sits at 114.85. That's a measure of how heavy the paddle feels when you're actually swinging it. And that number is low for an elongated shape, which means it swings faster than you'd expect. Twist weight is 6.3. That's basically how stable the paddle is when you hit off center. So stability is okay, but I found some weight on the throat help improve the stability quite a bit, making resets under pressure a touch easier to execute. Power metrics tell a more interesting story. Firepower score is 88. Serve speeds average 60.7 miles per hour, which lands in the 87th percentile. Punch volley speed came in at 39.2 miles per hour, 89th percentile. So you're getting legitimate foam level performance, not just at the absolute top of the range. Spin measured at 2,301 RPM, putting it in the 90th percentile. That's strong spin performance despite a surface that doesn't feel sandpaper rough. The 13mm wide body is a different animal. Mine weighed 7.82 ounces with a swing weight of 105.8 and a twist weight of 6.95. That's quick and easy to whip around. And the higher twist weight means better stability on mishits compared to the elongated. Firepower score is 74, noticeably lower than the 15mm. Serve speed came in at 59.7 miles per hour, which is right around average at the 50th percentile. Punch volley speed was 39.9 miles per hour, so it got serious pop at the net. Spin measured at 2,225 RPM, which is still strong at the 56th percentile. Now, I'm working on a new beta control score metric on my website, natspickleball.com. A higher score indicates better maneuverability, control, and forgiveness. And the control score for the 15mm elongated came in at 43, and the 13mm wide body came in at 64. The price is $280 for any model. That puts the Peacock up against paddles like the Selkirk Boomstick, Carbon True Foam Waves in Genesis, and Luz Infernal in the $250 to $330 range, while competing functionally with much cheaper options like the Loco, Quanta, Vessel, Coral, and a host of others at sub $200. I started with the 15mm Elongated. This sits firmly in the linear power class, but nothing about the Peacock felt explosive like you'd get from the Black Opal or Flick F1. Side by side, testing with those paddles showed the Peacock required slightly more swing to get the same penetration on drives. That lines up with the firepower score of 88. Plenty of power, just a bit more tamed than the hottest foam paddles. Where the Peacock stands out is feel. Some foam paddles have a hollow, resonant impact, that characteristic thud sound and sensation. The 15mm is denser and more muted. It doesn't feel crisp like some very stiff foam faces or like the 13mm version. But it also doesn't have that obvious hollow feedback. It plays smooth and dense with a linear response. I'd say it plays more connected than typical foam, and nothing about the size of the sweet spot had me questioning if this was smaller than average. Spin was genuinely strong. Despite the surface not being aggressively textured, I could shape serves and drives without forcing anything. That 2,301 RPM measurement tracks with on-court experience. This is operating in the top spin tier, even if it doesn't feel like sandpaper rough. And that's due to the dwell time or ball pocketing. Control is where the Peacock earns its spot. Compared to hotter foam paddles, it's noticeably easier to keep the ball in play. Blocks and resets don't spring long the way they sometimes do with the more poppy paddle. Counters on drives came off more predictably. If you struggled with foam paddles feeling too hot or jumpy, the Peacock sits on the more forgiving side of that spectrum without giving up legitimate power. Initially, drops were manageable but needed some focus until I dialed it in after a few games. One area I struggled with was consistency on softer shots. That dense, muted feedback didn't always give me the feedback I wanted, but that's typical of most foam cores. Some of that improved with time, and it never felt or played as good to me as the best Gen 3s, but by no means was it bad here. After a few sessions, I added some weight in the throat area to drop the bounce point and boost stability. That adjustment made the paddle easier on blocks and helped smooth out the response. The 13mm wide-body version is where things shift. The stability upgrade is immediate. Blocks stay online, resets don't twist off the face on mishits, and defensive touches came off controlled. That 6.95 twist weight, nearly a full point higher than the elongated, makes a real difference at the kitchen. Pop is the headline here. That top percentile punch volley speed isn't just a number. You feel it in short stroke exchanges. You can pressure hands without over punching, and the ball comes off with decent pace. That 74 firepower score is substantially lower than the 15mm, but at the net, this thing packs a punch. The stock maneuverability is excellent. That 105.8 swing weight makes it genuinely fast in hand, and because the bounce point is more head light than the elongated, it whips around without effort. The trade-off is dwell time. Drops and resets are still manageable, but there's less margin than the 15mm. If you're someone who lives off soft touch, the 15mm is the better choice. If your game comes alive at the line and you want quick hands with stable blocks and serious pop on counters, the 13mm makes more sense. But make no mistake, the 13mm is better suited for advanced players. The feel on both paddles is firmer and more connected than most foam cores I've played. It doesn't feel generic. The feedback is quieter off the ball than some of the louder Gen 3 and 4 builds, but there is a sharp, satisfying crack, and the connection to the ball stays intact instead of going overly muted. If you're considering one of these Peacocks, here's how to choose. The 15mm elongated has better refinement and a softer control window. It's the more versatile option if you play a balanced game and want legitimate power without going nuclear. 80% of players should start here. The 13mm widebody has more instant energy and faster hands with elite pop at the net, but gives up some baseline power and touch. I think most players should start with the 15mm versions. The 13mm is the more specialized tool. I think it's for advanced players with complete control of their game. At $280, the Peacock competes directly with other high-end foam paddles. The Loco costs about $100 less, and Quanta at about $200 less. They deliver similar or slightly higher raw power depending on the build. If you're chasing maximum firepower for the money, the Loco or Quanta is the smarter buy. The Peacock's advantage is in feel, that denser, more muted impact and slightly more forgiving behavior on counters and blocks. Against the Coral in all-court paddle at $200, the Peacock offers stronger spin and a more refined feel, but you're paying $80 more for those upgrades. The value gap is tough to justify unless you specifically want that denser impact and higher spin ceiling. The defining difference is feel. The Peacock is, I think, marginally more connected than most of those options. Whether that's worth $280 depends on how much you value that characteristic. So here's where I land. The Peacock plays well. I had a lot of fun with it. The 13mm wide body in particular does something a bit different than most foam paddles. It plays firmer and more intentional rather than just bouncy, and attacking at the kitchen with pop is legitimately impressive. The 15mm elongated is a solid option with good spin and manageable power, and it's my overall pick from the Peacock lineup. But at $280, it's competing with paddles that perform as well or better for $80 to nearly $200 less. Is it fun and does it play well? Yes, I enjoyed it quite a bit. But unless you specifically want dual certification and that denser, more muted feel, it's hard to recommend spending the extra money. The performance isn't the problem. It's genuinely very, very good and among the best playing foam core paddles I've played. But I think there is a value problem. If this paddle were priced like others except the boomstick, it would be much easier to recommend. At $280, you're paying a premium for marginal differences in feel and certification status. So here's my recommendation. If you've tried other foam paddles and found them too hot or too hollow, and you specifically want something with a denser, more controlled feel while staying in the foam power class, check out the Peacock. So that's it. That's the Proton Peacock review. Would you pay $280 for a more refined foam paddle when cheaper options deliver similar performance? Let me know in the comments. If this was helpful, hit that like button and subscribe for more pickleball content just like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.